Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Magic Hour podcast. I'm your host, Shireen Campbell, and I'm the founder of My Little Magic Shop. One day, I lit a candle and asked for clarity in my professional and life path. Soon after, I was gifted with the message that I'm here to help others go through exactly what I was going through then. And just like that, My Little Magic Shop and the Magic Hour podcast was born. Welcome, Tiana. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you, Shireen. It's really wonderful to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. You're so calm. You give me this, your vibe. I'm totally feeling it. And I'm ooh, but I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Where are you from? What was your upbringing like?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in the edge of the Sequoia National Forest in the mountains of California, what's now known as California. Originally it was Yocut lands, and now I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and these are the unceded lands of the Cowlitz and Chinook tribes, among many others. And my upbringing was surrounded by nature and really isolated. So I grew up in a big family with 5 siblings on a lot of land with no neighbors, and I just explored outside a lot. It was kind of magical. We had this pond in the backyard. I would climb up trees and hang out with rocks all day. So that's a lot of what my childhood was like.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I feel like that would be so peaceful. So I've been to Portland before to visit a friend, and it's definitely very green and beautiful. I've never been to the mountains where you are, but I imagine that it's super, super peaceful. How did your family end up there? Was there is there some sort of family history? It seems like it was very remote.
Yeah, well, how does one end up alone in the mountains? Yes, there was definitely a family history there. My great aunt, I want to say, had some land and a horse ranch, and then I think my grandparents actually had the home, and eventually they had our parents take it over. And we lived there for a good portion of my childhood. And then we moved into the city, which was not the city. It's another small town, but it felt like the city.
Wow. Do you feel like that was a big transition, time period to go from playing with rocks and climbing trees and not really seeing too many neighbors into just more action and probably less space?
Yeah, what a reckoning of new worlds that I explored. And also, it happened to be the same age developmentally when, as a child, you start to kind of understand other people and how they relate to you. You're like, oh yeah, other people think of me in this way, and what is perception and all these things. And it was a little challenging, I won't lie, but I'm happy I had that experience to expand my world.
Yeah, I love that. What came first, your love for music or your love for movement?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's hard for me to separate, actually. Because when you think about when you watch a baby listening to music and wiggling their body around, I feel like they're very much connected. But I will say that I grew up in a family with musicians, so I definitely had a lot of sound woven into my earliest experiences. And so movement probably came later in the practice that I have now.
Okay, so I feel like one of the reason why I even discovered you was called Clubhouse, and on this app you were doing this beautiful sound bath, and I thought it was really magical, and and it led me to think how does one end up in the world of sound baths or sound healing? How did you get there? Tell me a little bit about your journey, how you went from utilizing, just enjoying music and enjoying movement into wanting to use it to bring healing or even heal yourself.
That's a great question, because there are actually so many little things that led me in that way. And then now looking back, I realized I've had sound healing as a practice for a long time. I just didn't know how to name it. But yeah, I grew up maybe with a more traditional musician background because I had musicians in the family, and I really wanted to contribute in that space. I was a singer, and I joined bands, and it was super fun for me, but there was something else that was calling to me. And I would say I stumbled into sound healing through probably the door of meditation and other wellness practices. And that was just born out of this curiosity of what is a body? What is our mind? How are we existing here? And are there ways to shift that? And what feels good and true? And so in that exploration, I found myself doing a lot of sensory based experiences, and I'm a highly sensory person. So it was just what I was naturally drawn to and very therapeutic. And I had really powerful experiences, with organic sounds in particular. And then that led me down the path of research into what is vibration and how can we use that to help the body move through energy.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's something that I'm not particularly well versed on. Like I know that energy, you can't see it, but it's there and it's constantly flowing, and like we are energy, everything around us is energy. But this idea of using sound to really move and guide and release, or even take in energy, I think is so beautiful. Like, would you be able to share like a little bit as to like how you understand that at work?
Yes. So I understand it from, I would say, probably two separate spaces in my brain. There's the logical side that's like, oh, I've done this research to understand this concept of entrainment, which is that if we're exposed to a certain vibration, naturally our cells will want to kind of mimic what is happening. And then, so that's more of the cerebral trying to understand and comprehend how it all works. But truly, my experiences that have been most profound, less logic to them. They're all feeling based. I forgot where I was going with that point.
You were more just talking about like there's like the intellectual understanding of how sound moves energy through the body, and then there's kind of like this more emotive part of it. So like actually, I'm guessing you wanted to say feeling the energy actually move through your body, which is like a little bit, which and if that's what you're saying, I totally get it, because I think that for the longest time I understood intellectually what energy meant and what it meant to like open a chakra, right? And then I had a chakra that was blocked, and I had a shaman open it, and I felt it, and that was a completely different layer of understanding.
Yes. Thank you for speaking to that. It's whatever pathway gets you to a state where you can be open to experiencing whatever feels true in your body. That's what I'm all about. And I found that's why it's kind of nice to either create an experience for people to dive into without a lot of expectation, or come with a couple of facts and some scientific data to say, this is what is happening when you're listening to sound. And if neither of those land too much, then it's a lot of people can relate to, you put on a song that is your song. It changes how you feel. You hear a song that's not your song. That also changes how you feel. So we have some say in the energy that we participate in, and sound is a really cool way to tap into that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like when I know I have to get some work done, I have a playlist that's probably very heavy on Beyonce. And like there's a song 6 inch that she has, and I can really start working because I'm like, yes, and I grinded night and day. And I mean, I don't know all the lyrics, but like I like can really start to feel focused. And now that you've said that about, sound being scientifically this idea that like your cells will want to do whatever the sound is encouraging it to do. Like I never thought about it. Now I have this very vivid image in my head of like my cells like dancing when the
Yeah.
energy super high, and I can see how like someone was saying the other day to me that like if they know they need to cry, then I'll play really sad music to allow them to like kind of move through that emotion. So I think that using sound is so powerful. And I mean, I always thought about it a lot from like the lyrics, right? Because like when I'm like listening to a song and I'm like, oh, it's a sad song because they said I'm so sad, baby, take me back. And so, but I like never thought too deeply into like actually the actual music part, like the non-lyrical part of it, which I think is really beautiful. When I think about a sound bath, like that's what I'm kind of like connecting that to, and like I'm like sound is incredibly powerful. And I'm like, how do you like, what was your experience in terms of learning about creating sound baths? But first I want to say, can you explain for anybody who doesn't know what a sound bath is, and then tell me a little bit about your journey in terms of being able to create sound baths?
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't been to a sound bath, there's probably a lot of different varieties and ways that that can exist. But the most common one that I've come into experience with is it's an environment where you go. Usually there's other people with you, like a community setting, but it can also be privately. And generally you'll lay down on the floor and somebody will have a variety of instruments, and most likely they're acoustic and organic sounds. It's a higher quality instrument and vibration for you. And essentially you just lay down and that person will begin to wash over you with different frequencies and tones from these sounds, which is where we get the idea, I think, of sound bath. So there's no actual water involved, but there could be. And yeah, a lot of people like to use that space to meditate or just to simply relax. Sometimes I explain to people who aren't quite sure what it is, you can just consider it a nap time, honestly. Just lay down and allow your body to reset.
We love that. And then in terms of your favorite instruments when you're doing sound baths, what would be like your top like go-to? I've seen a lot of people do them with singing bowls, with tuning forks and bells. So, like what's your situation? Like what do you love to use?
It's hard to choose because they all serve such a beautiful purpose, but I would say I love gongs the most.
Okay.
There's just such an incredible power to gongs, and I've personally just had very transcendental experiences in gongs based sound baths.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really love chimes, like those bright tones can be nice when you're going into the deeper frequencies as well.
Oh, I love that. That's great. So, I guess has there been an experience that you've had with sound that you would love to share, like a transformative experience, like a time period where like you really like discovered something about yourself or released something about yourself or like had a really amazing aha moment.
Well, sound has been with me through every heartbreak, and I might not be alone in that sentiment.
Mhm.
So it has truly been such a healer and a place for transformation. But to maybe select a single moment, I would say the first sound bath that I went to that used a gong, probably why I love gongs so much. I remember I showed up, I didn't know what to expect, and I was really tired. I hadn't slept well the night before and I'd worked a long day. I have a meditation practice and I like to go into those spaces kind of with an intention and really focus on my breathing and do my practices. And I was thinking, I'm way too tired for that. I don't want to meditate.
Mhm.
It's not today. And I was almost feeling a little down on myself for not utilizing it in that way. But I set the intention to relax and just enjoy and hopefully not fall asleep and snore. In the sound bath, suddenly I had a flashback to a memory of a pretty hard time. I was going through a breakup. It was interesting because in my mind, or like in my more daily thinking, I wouldn't think that this memory had healing for me. I thought that I had moved through a lot of that work within the relationship. This is interesting. I'm going back to this memory. I have a practice of visualization at times where you'll go back into a certain memory and then you'll kind of place yourself in a specific action that maybe then reprograms a little bit of the memory and heals it for you. It's a cool practice, but for some
Yes.
reason I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I use it. I got trained as a timeline healing meditation. They call it timeline healer, but like that's one of the ways that you do it. But they're also shamans use it. So like shamanic journeying is like that's a big part of it. So it's like the idea is you can revisit the moment, not change any of the like actual things that happen, but change the energy around it and send yourself love. So I yeah, okay, go ahead, continue.
so I'm familiar with kind of directing that memory and then again placing, I'm gonna put some positive energy into this and like kind of reframe it. But I found it so interesting that I was vividly going to this place. I was like, I'm just going to watch the movie on the screen and see what happens. And I saw myself in two different body formats, the old me that was upset and what you might describe as a higher self
Mm-hmm.
kind of hovering above the scenario. And I just watched this healing unfold without it felt like it was outside of myself in a way. And it was pretty bizarre because there was a single moment, like I remember that time in my life, it was actually very hard to get out of bed and to even drink water. And I was really going through it. And then in skip to the sound bath, I'm having this experience and I'm embracing myself and placing like a kiss on the small of my upper back. And it's funny because in that exact moment, suddenly I had this deja vu, and I remembered this time in real life, in that time when I just kind of suddenly got out of bed and got a glass of water, and it helped me break this cycle. And it felt strange, and like timelines were crossing in a way. And whatever the case, it really affected me and it shifted my energy. And when I left the sound bath, I was like, wow, I'm so much lighter. I didn't know I had something to release in that way.
And it's so funny because your intention was to really just relax, and the universe was like, I'm gonna relax you, all right. Which is
So true.
how it happened. But I love that. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel
Yeah.
like it's in those stories that we see like such vivid examples of how like these different modalities can really help us to just grow, grow and evolve and just get to this more loving and accepting space, so and I love that sound was like very much a catalyst for that. I am also like, now that I'm thinking a little bit more about sound baths, like do you have a how do you prepare for one? Like is it something that's very much like, okay, I'm just gonna lay out my instruments, I'm gonna, smudge, put myself into some sort of meditative state, and then you just go? Or do you like plan it out? Like is it like, how does it work?
Well, if it's for me, then I am a little loose with the format and the intention, and I just kind of let myself be guided by whatever feels right, and I'll get up sometimes and move around if that feels right. But if it's for other people, the intention, well first I like to set an intention, like why am I offering this and what would I like to bring to the space, and ask myself, how can I create an environment that is welcoming for everyone? And how can I allow people to, yeah, just feel safe? Because sometimes in a sound bath, new things can come up and it can be really powerful. And then if you have people there to witness it with you, if you feel safe, it's like so special. So in preparation, yeah, I like to kind of think through very much the environment. As I said, I'm a pretty sensitive person, so I'm like, where is it? Where is the space? And will there be any interruptions via sound? Are there very comfortable mats or blankets for people? Is it winter? Do we want tea? What's a good preface so that everyone understands the protocol of the space? And yeah, and then I kind of go from there. And before I begin playing, I always make sure to ground myself as much as I can so that I can be really centered in what I'm offering.
And then is it like then with the actual play, like once you start playing, is it like very much like you just go into like a trancey type situation, or is it like something that you like rehearse all the time, like rehearse before, and you're like, oh, I know, like I'm gonna do this, and I don't know that much about sound, but I'm gonna hit this gong, and I'm gonna then I'm gonna work on this, like how, like what's that process look like?
Yeah, it's actually pretty intuitive, but it's intuitive after I had spent a bit of time kind of understanding what's a nice flow for people. Um, so doing a little research, which is also going to sound baths, right? And sitting like, when is it nice to have a like continuous sound, and when would it be nice to add tuning forks into it? Again, every sound bath is different, and it's about reading the energy of the room, I think, and trying to intuit what would be most supportive to others. So each one is its own thing, and generally, I actually can't plan too far in advance. It's like the morning of, I look at the instruments, I see what's calling to me. I generally know that there will be one like thing that I'm used to using, and then I go from there.
Okay, this might be another ignorant question, but like say like you're like, okay, I want to do, a heart chakra balancing sound bath. Is that something that you can do? And then what does that, do you use specific instruments? Is it based off of like the key, the note, or the keys, or like this, and I know it's probably not keys, but like the tone, like how do you, is that a thing?
Yeah, definitely. And those are all really great questions. I wouldn't call them ignorant in any way.
I mean, I use ignorant in like the most loving way.
Yeah, sure, sure.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a question, so you don't know yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the chakras do correspond to different notes, and there is a scale that connects that, and that kind of goes deeper into a world that I'm not as well versed on. But I do know that there are specific notes that relate to each chakra. And from my own background, I can also tell you that there's something called resonant body frequencies. So if you think of the classic opera singer singing to a glass, a wine glass, and it breaks, what they're doing is they're finding the same resonant frequency of the wine glass. They're matching it at such a high pitch that it then excites the cells so much that they transform, which is why sound healing is really cool. Because if there's things that need to be broken up, that's what's happening. There are different notes that relate to different parts of the body, and then there's different schools of thought in terms of chakras and how that all connects. And I definitely connect with that framework, and I think it's super helpful. So if I were to do a sound bath around it, I think that I would choose tones that would be supportive to it, but I think I would guide people more in a reflective exercise in the beginning or the end, whether it's just within themselves and their intention or something that they're sharing to tap into that space. And then I might also offer some somatic based tool to connect with the heart, and literally just placing your hand on your chest and bringing your awareness to your heart is actually a very powerful practice.
I love that. I just got this image of like, this glass breaking, and then I was just like, oh crap, like, I you definitely have to tell people before you go over there like breaking up heart chakra energy so people don't lose their minds. Like, what did you do to me?
Well, that's it's good to have a little warning, but not too much, because you don't want to scare people away.
Yeah, that is so true. I remember like when I had this throat chakra blockage, and my shaman took a stone and he like had me say this word into the stone 3 times, and then he just drops it, but he didn't tell me anything. I don't know, maybe because he didn't realize I would have the reaction that I did, and then all of a sudden like my throat is like pulsing, and then there's this huge explosion, and I'm completely losing my mind because I'm like, what did you do? Something happened. Like, and I think that like it's probably on the one hand good he didn't tell me, because maybe it would have like, tapered the experience down. But then I'm also kind of like, but why didn't you tell me?
Yeah. And I'm curious if you think in that experience, do you think that somebody kind of, I don't want to say forced, but do you think that they put that experience on you, or do you think that they created an environment for what your body was ready to explore?
Yes. So I think that it was definitely, they created a really magical environment, because he did, we did do like a shamanic journey. Like there was definitely, it intented the stone with a word that I had been like, we had put a lot of intention behind releasing. I think that I just had not yet, I intellectually understood what it meant to unblock, and I understood a little enough about chakras at that point, because this was, like maybe 10 years ago. So like I had understood just enough, but like I think that I had yet to cross that threshold of knowing. I feel like there's a difference between, understanding and like knowing. So like I jumped on over to the knowing side, like, okay, energy's a thing. Like that's real. They're nobody's joking. Which I think was really beautiful to do. But like, yes, definitely. And I love that you make that point, because yes, he didn't just do it to me. He created an environment that was conducive. And then I was also, I did walk into that experience like with an intention to heal. I didn't know
Yeah.
what I was going to heal, or like exactly what that healing looked like, but I did have an intention, and then he created an environment. So, and I love that you say that specifically, because you're creating these beautiful sound baths that, people, that's like one part, you're creating an environment, but you're also not taking away like people's ability to own that experience. and to, equally participate, because of course, like, you can get out of it whatever it is that you intend to get out of it. And even in your example, a little bit earlier, you had mentioned that, like, you didn't want to necessarily be there, but you still set an intention to, like, relax, and you still, showed up at as best you could in that moment. And I think that that's definitely important. So could you tell me a little bit about, what are some tips for folks that, maybe it's their first sound bath, maybe they've been to, a couple, but like they really want to ensure that they get the most out of the experience. Like, what would you tell them that there's some things they must do before they, go?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're going to your first sound bath and you want to get the most out of it, I would recommend bringing anything with you that might help you be a little more comfortable, and that might be a mat, a blanket, a pillow, or I like using little totems or touchstones that just kind of bring me joy or ground me. When you're going to a sound bath, if you can, try not to schedule something super important right after, so you can give yourself time to be slow. I think that's so nice. It's kind of like, if you're going to take the time to go and take a bath and like really wind down, then don't go to a meeting like right after it, or maybe do. It can be really nice, but if it's your first time, I would say treat yourself. Also, I'd also like to share that there's no wrong way to do a sound bath, and whatever can allow you to feel open and comfortable and safe, go there. Trust your intuition if one sound bath looks better than the other, and just allow yourself to be curious and explore. That's what I would say.
I love that. I love to take crystals with me. So like I completely agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. I loved all those points. And like I'm with you on the, like, don't schedule anything super serious, because like if it's something really serious and you feel all like dazed and like, like you're in that vibe and you walk out feeling all like open, and then you have to go into something with, at a different level, different frequency levels, a different vibe, like it can kind of, might be a little jarring to get pulled out so quickly.
Yeah, and there also might still be like little things, little insights or things that if you're slow and you're in your body, you can access. But if you're going straight into another environment where you need to be very interactive, yeah, you might lose that window. And I forgot to add, definitely, if you feel called to it, set an intention before you go into the sound bath and just let it go and see if it influences the experience at all. I think intention's a really powerful tool.
And one thing you had mentioned a little bit earlier was about breathing. So like it sounds like, breathing and music and sound like would go so nicely together. Are there any particular breathing techniques that you would share to, someone who's participating in a sound bath that, are particularly soothing or healing or helpful for you?
Yeah. I would say two things to know in that way. Just by focusing on your breath, you will automatically enhance your experience because you're stepping into a meditative practice. And when we do that, we are strengthening this muscle of awareness so that when our minds kind of travel into another place, we bring them back into our breath and into our body. And it might not always feel super comfortable, but trust me, there are many benefits to that. And if you're feeling any resistance or intense feeling in the sound bath, or you just want to enhance the experience in general, if you take a deep breath from the lowest point of your belly and slowly inhale, hold, and slowly exhale, it can really help whatever is happening move through with a lot of ease, and it oxygenates your blood at a higher volume, and it's just, it's very nourishing. So those are two recommendations that I would offer.
I love those. Thank you. All right,
Yeah.
so just switching gears a little bit. So I watched your beautiful videos on Instagram, and they're like, the way that you move your body is like almost bewitching. Like I feel like I dropped into meditative state just like watching you. Can you talk to me a little bit about, like what it is, the type of dance? Like just tell me a little bit about it, because I haven't seen people move like that in, like often or ever. That might have been my first time. So like, can you just tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, and thank you for that reflection. it means a lot to hear, and it inspires me because the practice is kind of it's my own form of meditation. So if it can bring you into that state, I think that's very special, and I appreciate knowing that. My practice with movement was definitely born out of a need to move through trauma. I was super disembodied maybe 5 years ago, went through some experiences, got some PTSD, and just felt really numb and disconnected. So along that path, I found movement, and it was this slow return back into the body. And there wasn't a particular style of dance that I was after. It was really just a practice of showing up and trying to get back in there. In years of exploring with that, there's a certain language that's kind of come to me, and it's not one that I sought out. For anyone who's a creator out there, maybe you can relate to, there are times when you don't think to make something and it just comes through you, and that's definitely my experience with movement. Though along that journey, as I've been exploring what movement looks like and feels like and how to share it, other people have come to me and brought different styles of dance. They're like, oh, hey, it reminds me of this or this or this. And so I've learned about a few styles of dance that way, and watching them, like, oh, yeah, wow, these are very connected. And that returns to me this thought of, seems as though there's something that we can connect to, this like this larger psychic space. And I found my way through with the body, and it seems like, yeah, it just felt very soothing. Like there's a collective pathway of information that's coming through this movement. Other people in other decades and cultures are understanding it, and it's all by way of the body and relating to, I guess, the land around you.
Yeah. It's it like when I think about it, now that I'm reflecting and like listening to you, for some reason I feel like it feels like moving yoga or something. There's this sense of like truly engaging all these muscles of your body, and then it feels like there's a lot of deep breathing that's happening. Like it feels like it's, just truly connecting, physically with your body, but it's just like almost like you've gone to you've transported to another world. What does it feel like when you finish? Or actually tell me first, what does it feel like while you're doing it? Do you feel like you get to the same meditative space, or is it like a different type of space? And then how do you feel afterward?
Yeah, so I have a very rich meditative practice, and sometimes that involves me sitting still and breathing and what have you. That's the hardest one for me to do. So when I'm moving, I am definitely bringing the intention of being as present as I can through movement, through all of the senses, and through breath. And what it feels like, well, my practice is that I select a song that I'm just drawn to in that time, whatever one strikes me, and I'll typically listen to it on repeat for hours. And I will release rational thought as best I can, and just go into a space where it's all flow, and it's very much a trance-like experience. And I'm not thinking, I'm just being in that place. And I have a practice with film as well, so oftentimes I'll record what's happening and reflect back, and it's really interesting how these movements just come out and make so much sense for where I am in that time and what I'm working through, whether it relates to a chakra or an emotional experience. My hands tell these stories, and I'm not even realizing it. So yeah, it's an interesting relationship. It just feels like flow.
Yeah. And then like when you stop, do you feel like all buzzy and like high? Or like what is it? Because I'm like, sometimes when I do yoga, or I get out of a pretty intense meditation, like I always feel like I'm buzzing. Like do you do you feel any sort of, different way?
Yeah, I feel alive, and I feel gravity, and I feel like I'm in my cells, weighted in my cells in a very particular way. Like there's a quality to living after moving for a couple hours, and it's a high, but it's also, I mean, it kind of sounds silly, but it's just being able to access the present moment in a very embodied state.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so now that you have, a ton of experience and like you've definitely healed and grown and transformed, if you could go back to your younger self, first learning all of this, like getting into, healing through sound, healing through movement, what advice would you give?
Yeah, if I could go back to that self, and I bet I have, I would go to them and I would just say, yes, keep going, keep going. It's not supposed to make sense.
Yeah.
Just trust the feeling, follow what is opening. Joy is where it's at, and it's okay to want to go to move towards that. And I think it'd just be an encouraging force, that it's going somewhere. There's a purpose to all of these interests and desires, and there will eventually be a way that you can weave it together and offer it to other people, which for me, when I was first learning, I think that was a little bit hard to take up that much space just for myself and my own healing process.
I can totally relate to that on so many different levels, especially because sometimes you are gifted with these beautiful ideas, right? Or like visions of what you can create, or what you would like to create, but often it takes time for it to all for you to understand how it will all fully come together, because sometimes they can feel so disjointed, and then there comes a moment, normally years down the line, and you look back and you're just like, I understood why it had to happen in that order, in
Mm.
such a almost disjointed fashion, and now I'm so happy that it like all is kind of coming together to create something really unique and magical and powerful. So that totally resonates with.
Yeah, just trusting that surrender again and again.
Yeah, that is definitely very good advice. Okay, so for those out there that are, just getting into sound healing, what types of tips and, or even movement, but tips and tricks or suggestions do you have for them?
Sure. Yeah. Sound healing it is a whole world, and you can explore from so many different avenues. So my advice would be check in with your desire around it and kind of get really clear on what about healing is motivating to you. Like, why is it something that you're drawn to? If you can name that. Sometimes we don't know why and we just have to go. And then put yourself in environments, whether it's online researching or sound baths in person, or right now there's a lot virtually, to just explore what do you like, what do you not like, and allow yourself to be a citizen of those spaces, but also connect with the community, because I found it's a really wonderful community, and people want to share and talk to you about the instruments that they're using. And from there, I think a lot of doors will open, but it can be a little overwhelming in the start because it's a big space. So don't be afraid to just go into the first thing that speaks to you and stay curious.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Amazing. Thank you so much. This was beyond awesome. I feel like you educated me on things, all things sound and movement. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and magic with us today. So here at the Magic Hour, we always love to end an episode with some feed your soul questions, because I love to understand more about, how healers feed their souls. So I would love for you to answer just 3 questions for me.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is, are there any consistent activities or rituals you do to maintain a sense of inner peace?
So many. Deep breathing, going for walks outside, writing, and sound and movement. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, and then when it comes to self development, are there any books or tools that really offered you some life changing discoveries?
Absolutely. I would say that what changed my life the most, what started like the foundation, was going to therapy and learning to meditate. And from there, I was guided into what was going to be best for me, which happened to be acupuncture. And and all these other spaces, and TED Talks and books and what have you. I'm almost hesitant to share the books that have impacted me because I think you're your best judge, whoever is out there listening. But to share a small window into my world, there's a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is The Miracle of Mindfulness. And that book really helped me connect deeper into meditative practices. But it was also a book that when I first got, it was hard for me to read because I think I wasn't ready for it. Yeah, I think that's what I would share.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, and then finally, before beginning a creative process, what type of preparation do you normally undertake?
Before I begin a creative process, I do a lot of deep listening. I usually perform a series of rituals to bypass that rational mind that we spoke on. But I would actually say that is the creative process. So I don't really know what comes before. Probably listening. Finding a way to just be as present as possible and listen. When I go for walks in nature for a long time, usually that's when inspiration and ideas find me that feel, and they're places I want to explore.
Oh, thank you so much, Tiana. Again, this was such a magical chat. Can you tell our listeners how they can follow you on your adventures?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the best place to find me is on Instagram right now. And my handle is higher.feeling. That's HIGHER.FEELING. And there's some more things in the works coming in terms of ways to reach out and work with me. But for now, feel free to message me on that platform.
And she messages back, I know for the fact.
Yeah. I would love to hear from anyone who is, if you're just curious, you have a question or want to say hi, please.
Oh, thank you again so much. Super appreciate it.
Yeah, and Shireen, thank you so much for this work that you're putting into the world. It's really inspiring always to meet more seekers and folks that are curious about ways to connect and heal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's like a joy. It like highlighted my life right now. Thank you so much for listening to the Magic Hour podcast. If you want to learn more, you can find us on our website, www.mylittlemagicshop.com, and follow us on our Instagram at mylittlemagicshop. See you next time.